Le nationalisme, c'est la guerre.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leonard Boy. I will be the moderator for this afternoon session about the outcomes of Eurolab. About 4 days, very intense days, this whole group here and here has been debating and philosophizing about the future of Europe and the strategies we need to make Europe a more successful player in the minds of the Europeans itself. It was about, I think, 2 years ago, on the first meeting here in the Balie of, not that time called Act for Democracy, but the Forum on European Culture, where there was a talk between Wolfgang Tillmans and Rem Koolhaas about the fact that there is not a real good, original and strong narrative on the benefits of Europe. And that was even before Brexit. And after Brexit, they came together again in close contact with the organization of the Forum on the European Culture here in Amsterdam, and they decided something more has to be done. It's not only talking, it's really acting to find people to come together. Creative minds, architects, artists, philosophers, instead of the politicians, to come together and really join forces. Because if we take in mind that over the upcoming years, 2019, the new round of European elections is already around the corner. And there's a lot at stake. We had Brexit, and we see what's happening in Turkey. We see what's happening in Russia. We also see the upcoming rise of nationalism, the populism movement in Italy, so much more on the set. And what does that mean for us? Can we just simply sit on our chairs and watch the scene? Or should we act? Should we do something? Well, that was the start of the Eurolab. And it was a 4 days meetup in the Stedelijk Museum. Annemarijn Epker, you're the project leader of the whole forum, but you were very much involved also in the preparations of this Eurolab. What has happened?
It's maybe good to tell a bit about where it all started, because in the beginning of March we had this idea that we should send out an open call for ideas throughout Europe to reach as many Europeans as possible. And so we sent out this proposal, and we thought, like, okay, if we receive 20, 40 ideas, that would be actually quite cool. But then they came in, and we received 400 applications in the end, so that was really fantastic. From all over Europe and the rest of the world. So actually we saw a bias that there were a lot of people from Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium that sent in their proposals, but we tried to really select a diverse group of people to come here to Amsterdam. So I think 34 people have been invited to join us from the call, and we're really happy that you are all here. And I know that also some of the people who haven't been selected are here tonight, so I think it's also great that you are here. And in addition to those 34 people who are graphic designers, artists, photographers, campaigners, branding experts, we also invited like a group of people that we think had really something to add to the Eurolab, which was a group of 16 people that came from Bulgaria, from Croatia, from Italy, and many other European countries. So so in the end we ended up with a group of 50 people. And
you worked in close cooperation with Stephan Petermann and also, of course, Rem Koolhaas and Wolfgang Tillmans to make this group as diverse as possible.
So we try to invite people with different disciplines, different expertises, and we're really happy that it turned out so well.
And can you give us some sort of an insight, an example, what sort of people brought in ideas and how did it look like?
Yeah, I wanted to show you actually one brief example of an idea that we found really interesting, which is called Cicerone, and it's made by the brothers Halbgewacht. So I think this is a good moment to start a short video to see, like, we really find it an outstanding idea that really shows the citizen advocacy campaign, what that kind of campaigns can do for Europe. So
okay, let's have a look, because it's a very strong example of a citizen advocacy campaign in Europe.
But having the same relatable figures at least makes it easy to talk and think about it, so we hope this helps. More importantly though, the EU contributions are a complex matter, even without the additional complications such as the Rotterdam effect. Depending on which parts to include and which effects you correct for, the distribution per country can look very different. Because of this, it is extremely difficult to get a clear image of what exactly the EU costs and how much money we gain from it. This goes for everyone, so be aware of those who speak in absolute numbers. Please let us know what you think, and if you liked our video, please subscribe to our channel for more videos in the future.
Yeah, Annemarie, I think it was a good example. The video itself, you can look it up at the internet. It's much longer, of course, but it gives a lot of sort of real facts and figures about the European Union instead of just ideas and average communication.
Yeah, I think that we found that really important as well, that Eurolab is not only about ideas, but it's also really a fact-finding mission. So we found it really important to collect all the facts together that show the diversity and the importance of Europe.
Yeah, and in this video, for example, you see a very defined way of looking into all the numbers of Europe and what does it mean to be a citizen, pay tax, and where does the money go to, and what are the benefits?
Yeah, I think maybe it's good to mention a little bit more the structure of this whole 4 days, because we had 3 chairs. They're sitting here on the front row, Rem Koolhaas Stephan Petermann and Wolfgang Tillmans. And we tried to create 6 different groups that were all focusing on different themes and different campaign. Some of the groups were focusing on nationalism, which we'll hear more about later on. Some of the groups were focusing on the importance of generations, demographics. That was the group of Rem. And so you will hear more about that later on, but we worked together in 6 groups. And maybe it's good to show a little bit how that went during those 4 days, because it's nice to, I think, to have a bit of an idea of what...
Okay, let's have a look at an impression of how everybody was working together. To me, it looks like the New York Times newsroom.
Yeah, I think so too, especially the last few hours. It really felt like a newsroom.
So we see a lot of people working behind their screens, but also a lot of information has been written down on the boards on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, this is when it was still a bit quiet. So the past few hours have been slightly different.
Well, but in a way, I think it's really nice. It was really happening just some hours ago. It was really in the making. Everybody was working and also very cooperative in making it work.
We have an impression right now.
I think we have an impression as well, so maybe we can just fade it a little bit, because you already said both Wolfgang Tillmans, Rem Koolhaas and Stephan Petermann has chaired a group, and they are going to present the results, of course. It's in a way a very comprehensive amount of information and ideas they're going to present, and as you already pointed out, I think the first group was really very much into the question why people are right now in the negative modus. What is really behind that? And Stephan was really focusing more a little bit on the facts and the figures of the success of Europe and why is it so badly communicated. And Rem, I think, is much more went into deep about how to overcome the shortcomings we see right now and why is it not happening from out of the more political arena. What is needed from other arenas to make a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's how it went. So I think it's a good moment to start with, to start inviting Wolfgang and Rem and Stephan to...
we start doing that. Okay, thank you so much. Annemarie and Epker, thank you. So indeed, let's start. We start with Wolfgang Tillmans, but not before. I just wanted to have some small impressions from one of the people here, because you have working so hard. You already mentioned that. May I start with you, Flavia? Just to give us an impression, how was it to be part of this forum and this lab?
I was strongly impressed by the competence that the Balie managed to reunite in this room, and I think we can all be looking forward to what we're going to see now.
Yeah, you're from Switzerland. What is your background? What are you doing?
I co-founded a political movement which is called Operation Libero, and we defend liberal institutions.
Right. So with that sort of knowledge, you came on the table and you were able to add something. Do you think the result is promising?
I mean, at least I tried to just propose some ideas and to tell a bit of the campaign work we do in Switzerland. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And of course, Fabian, I'd like to ask you the same question. You, where are you from?
I'm French, but living in London. For me, that was really important to be part of the Eurolab, and I was like really glad to be here, because I think there is an urgency for our generation to be part of such events. I lived the Brexit, I lived Trump, and next year it's the general election, 2019. There is already 30% of populists in the parliament, could be 51%. So I think as a young people, we need to act for Europe and being part of this event and think further that type of event. It's like really important.
Yeah. And Evelina, you're from Greece. You're an architect?
Yes, I'm an architect from Greece.
And how was it for you to be part of this Eurolab?
It was very exciting and very informative, I could say, because we could hear so many different people talking about things that I didn't know. And I learned a lot of things. And it was very amazing to work with all those different people. And so you will see yourself the results that are really great, I think.
So also to be part of the energetic approach, to be part of this group was already very important for you.
Yes, it was very important to create those new identity and narrative for Euro and for the European Union, and it was very exciting, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Wolfgang, up to you. You will start with the presentation, about 20 minutes, and let's proceed from there. Wolfgang Tillmans. I will try. I try to be close to you.
Okay, it's of course a little bit hard after all this announcement, the results. Of course, I had to protect myself also from expectations, and we called it Eurolab with the clear knowledge that it should have. Here, can we dim the lights? It is experimental. There isn't a finished campaign or anything that we were working towards. And so, you know, for something to happen, it shouldn't be harmed by too directed an approach. No, we didn't want to work like an agency that had gotten a brief. That was maybe also sometimes a little surprising for some, that we didn't have a brief. We split up.
Wolfgang, just 1 second.
Ja.
Mogen ook de banners en zo uit, want dat geloven we wel. We willen echt even aandacht op de presentatie.
Can't see the pictures.
Yep.
This one. That one. Thank you. We really saw the whole group as one, but technically we had to split up. So we split up into 3 groups, but we didn't see it as camps or teams. But one focus that we discussed was the fact that there is no European public. There isn't one European public, or at least there aren't many, like in the US, for example. And but one thing that was interesting is actually that even though there are 28 different national media markets, Hollywood films, Hollywood TV series are actually a common European public. They have a common European public. And we were wondering maybe there should be Netflix series that have a European origin or even subject that could speak over borders. Another idea that had been tried in the past was a European newspaper, usually without much success. And of course now is not the time to start a new newspaper, but the New York Times is successfully piggybacking 4-page supplements in other European newspapers. And we were thinking about the possibility of, for example, having a 4-page supplement of translated texts, so that people can see what the other side thinks. How does your neighbor think? And that could be done at tabloid level and at quality paper level. Sports is, of course, the most obvious and an outstanding European sort of unifying factor, with soccer, of course, being at the helm, and there was the idea to, if one could use T-shirts, to have people be photographed with them, soccer stars, because they are natural foreigners that a lot of people are interested in, because we found that it's important. The most important thing for the EU to thrive is also for us to be interested in our neighbors, in the other, and stars or sort of icons, European icons, are needed, who are considered as transnational, almost overcoming being sort of common household names. And somebody like Nicolaus Copernicus, even though he was a Polish, is understood as European. And we were wondering who these people could be. They are obviously not of Copernicus standing, and Stephen Hawking, unfortunately, is dead. But for example, Carlo Rubia, Zinedine Zidane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lech Walesa, Reinhold Messner, J.K. Rowling, Stromae, Roberto Benigni, Pedro Almodovar, Ian McKellen, Niklas Zennström, Janusz Fries, the inventors of Skype, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Sebastian Vettel. But who are the scientists? That I think there would be enormous potential, we thought. And the T-shirts you just saw were from the anti-Brexit campaign that I did 2 years ago, and it wasn't actually that easy to find famous people to stand up and speak out for Europe. It was interesting and kind of sad to see the lack of excitement before the vote. Afterwards, it was different. So we were looking around here the last 4 days, and this, of course, there was a great sense of sympathy, and we felt, well, one thing we like about Europe is that that we have positive personal experiences, and Ivan from Bulgaria, he told us this story about Gisela Stewart, the Labour MP who was leading the Leave campaign for Labour, and she was pro-European all her life, and then had a very bad experience at the European Commission, a personal hurting, and that personal experience turned her against the EU. But at the same time, we feel so understanding that it is personal why we like Europe and the European process. We also understood that, of course, we're now looking at a new language situation, and we were looking at campaigns in the 23 different languages. This is a Czech which reads, "Nobody likes clean water, nobody likes 4 weeks of paid holidays, nobody likes free roaming to call mum from abroad, and nobody likes to vote." To show that you like the EU and go and vote. So there was all sorts of friendly, benign things. But there is a split, even in our heads. We think the EU is mildly endangered and can be strengthened through friendly acts amongst neighbors. What we don't want to see is that the EU is under attack. Europe and democracy are under attack. This video that I'm going to show from the Visual Cultural Research Center, which is run by Vasil Cherepanin, one of the participants in Eurolab. This shows an art exhibition in Kiev, which was destroyed by black-clad Nazis. They shot at the works with guns and beat up artists in the face. The geographical center of Europe lies in Ukraine. The enemies of Europe use crass language with great success. The success of the EU in creating an open society has in Russia led to it being referred to as Gayropa. The Brexiters didn't shy away from racist language. American billionaires use lies and deception and manipulation to undermine the European project in the hope to get rid of its regulatory global power. However, we are dealing with nice stories about Erasmus babies and borderless travel. Whereas for people outside the EU, she is a beacon of hope, the last straw in an authoritarian and violent world. This was filmed by the video security camera. Can we have sound? So maybe a different approach is needed, and one has to address the seriousness of the situation. So we identified that this year's second iteration of the Forum on European Culture and the first Eurolab is actually exactly 1 year in advance of the 2019 European parliamentary elections, and that is the one truly democratic, complete European process that, as we can see here, has suffered dramatic decline in interest. And in the perverse thing about it, about this development, is that in 1979, I was 11 when it was founded. People were joking because it really was a joke. It had literally zero power, but 62% went to vote. And now the European Parliament actually has a lot of power, and it has done a great deal of legislation that is really useful. And people are less and less interested. And so in a way, it's really also a matter of just getting the few percent back who were lost over the years and come back, because it actually does matter now. It really does have power. And of course, the EU in Britain, for example, was not a cool thing. Lots of young Brits in particular didn't think voting was necessary. And so the idea is we had the idea to make voting for Europe a cool thing, to organize voting parties. One could, that one goes to vote together with friends, and make it an empowering act against haters, so that it's a unit of being together with friends and celebrate the fact that we are doing this together across the continent. And the togetherness could also be either an announcement of family voting together or partners voting together, or on the day of the voting here, some mock-ups of Roberto Benigni voted with Dad, Strome voted with Mum, Rem voted with Thomas. And to really get this cross-generational thing across, as the last people who remember the time when the EU was founded and what the anti-nationalist reasons were, are dying out. So this was one of the strongest narratives we felt that emerged, because it really is so direct, so understandable, but also it can be applied to so many things. Also, when researching for this project in the last 3 months, we realized that there is an almost infinite depth of organizations that are working for not on behalf of the European Union, but who are independent organizations that care about the EU, but that are all working in different situations, locations, and are usually not particularly connected. And so there seems to be a lot of duplication and not much clarity of where to go to actually when you want some information or when you want to get active. And of course, often it is also particularly politicized. So the desire arose to maybe turn Forum on European Culture, which is now since 3 years ago an existing foundation in Amsterdam, to be expanded to become an umbrella for other pro-European organizations, not to organize them, not to only just even as a place where one can find out about what is going on, and as an independent body that enables non-organized pro-EU enthusiasts to speak, campaign, and make them visible. Because the situation is, like, all this output, like for example the video by the Halbgewachs brothers, which I had originally wanted to show the full 5 minutes. It's a shame there wasn't a little bit more, because it really is stunning. It was made with €0 budget, purely personal energy and enthusiasm, and a desire to debunk myths about the EU. And this video and all their videos would find it impossible to land in the official channels of the EU, because the procurement process, the tender process for anything publication-wise from the EU is super complicated and has to be, of course, to stop corruption. And but it's impossible for activists to actually get to there. And we were wondering how could one speak, and of course other organizations also don't want individuals' input. So the idea that maybe Forum could work as a channel for us in the future, as well as offering an online platform that cuts through the jungle of official EU websites, because it is everything the EU does is announced. It is visible. It's actually very transparent. Transparency, the EU has learned, not for many, many years. It knows it has to be transparent, but it is hidden in endless type of its websites, and then it cannot act spontaneously. It cannot maximize on the positive things that come out in the media. For example, when on the 15th of July last year, all roaming charges across 28 countries were abolished, it was Vodafone who 3 months before made an advertising campaign that made it appear as if it was Vodafone cutting it. When the total ban on bee-harming pesticides happened earlier this spring, there was no messaging. You know, it's a carrier of great sympathy, and people would get behind it. But the EU doesn't. I don't know. It just can't communicate it. And if there was a website, for example, with a timeline of recent legislation that will become law in a year's time, activists could know this is going to happen, and we're going to use it, we're going to broadcast it in a way that the EU could never do. And of course the EU General Data Protection Act is something that is a great good for people, and could have been communicated more effectively. That's a little overview of what all the sorts of things we thought about. Thank you.
Wolfgang, thank you so much. A lot of work has been done, not only over the last 4 days, but as you showed also much earlier. And Stephan Petermann has been in that team for a long period as well. He has worked together in the forum on all the preparations on this Eurolab. And Peter, you're going to bring us to the second group and the outcomes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Wolfgang, for a great overview. We've been working a lot side by side, but not at the same time. So it's very good to see your final result. I have to say, I think can we show the screen already or not? Sounds doing. Thanks. I think our group or the people we worked with had three specific focal points. They will be slightly less political, perhaps, and more organized towards techniques, perhaps in general. A note, it is definitely work in progress, and sometimes I think you'll find that perhaps the technique that is underlying it might be better than the current state of a projection. But I'm going to present 16 ideas, and number 9 will blow your mind. That's a joke that comes back later. Facts. I was looking at facts because I've been very curious. Within the 400 participants who sort of submitted, there was zero mention of facts. There was not one proposal which had very clearly identified facts as a crucial element of political communication, and I was very puzzled by that. So we first started out with a plenary discussion of what are facts actually relevant or not, and then what do you do with them? I think we all concluded very fast, very early on, that we need less abstract numbers. The EU is very good actually at providing an enormous amount of numbers, but in such sheer volumes, in such composition that they become quite difficult to read. And I'm just going to show you a few small things that we're trying. For example, this is 1,500 animals the EU is protecting, which we are trying to collect and organize together, perhaps in a sequence that at some point makes sense. Or other forms of value. One thing we also thought of was trying to localize facts to the actual condition on the ground. So how can you correspond a large number or a fact back on a micro scale? For example, we took this system in which the European Union protects the local designation of origin, so that Parma ham has to come from Parma, etc., etc., and to see if we could somehow strategize advertising that responds to that you sort of acknowledge and remind the people there what the EU has done for them in a very local way. For example, this might be not relevant anymore in the near future. This would be another one to actually also expose the fact that thanks through the EU, aceto balsamico spreads throughout the Union as never before. Another thing we were interested in, or I'll just show it, was zooming. To what extent could you make a large number a small number, or how do you relate it to a local given? And that you can project the fact that you might be feeling alone if you insulate your house But as long as you zoom out and you see actually that it does represent an enormous effort by an enormous community. We're still struggling a bit, but we are convinced of the effect, but we're still struggling a bit with the shape and the way how to represent it. Obviously, it refers a bit to Eames's powers of 10, and perhaps there could be something more in it. These are we called facts and sentences to see actually how, without using numbers, you can also communicate big messages. But this is actually referring a bit to Wolfgang's Hi Mum. We have Hi Mum in all different languages, sort of to give a sense of the complete explosion of data roaming after the release of the roaming charges, which inevitably leads to more intense contact with your mother. That is at least the suggestion that we would like to present. Historical gifts is something we didn't really get to look into much, but for example, this is an effort trying to collect all the previous borders of Europe and showing basically the difference between then and now. And you could do that obviously with a number of different topics and themes to do that. With facts comes obviously one crucial element by now in the age of fake news, that trustworthiness somehow needs to be responded. And we have one brave social media and interaction designer who also tries to develop an app that would use interaction and also a trustworthy middleman to communicate facts to you so that you're reassured that a fact is actually a fact and not only part of fake news. In very brief, it's a very complicated but very compelling and I think promising proposal. Opposing facts, showing that both sides can live together or be close together, so that one side you can address the anti-people and the other side can address the pro-people, and that they're not in different places but they're actually closer than they think. Was maybe not super fact related, but still I think a compelling proposition. Let your emotional brain fight its little fight, then listen to the other half, so that you promote also listening and promote just contact between people. This is a bit a short summary for the facts group. Then the communications group, the goal was to get young people to vote, of course. And one of the ways we found very attractive places, obviously festivals, and trying to come up with some notions of how people can be further beyond the fact that there's probably quite some support for Europe in these places, what you could achieve. This is a map of all the festivals through Europe, so you see also quite a broad distribution throughout Europe, which could be your benefit. And then you have to find a way to add something. There was some ideas about makeup or about water, free water, or other stuff. Then the clickbait, number 9, now for number 10. Trying to seize sort of all the clickbait types of stories and seize them for Europe, to use basically that attractive and successful system for us. And some GIF experiments with the flag. Also about the notion that it's either incomplete or that it's missing. Obviously the last star is missing. But you could also do it as a loading symbol from your MacBook, basically also portraying the fact that the EU could be an ever-loading program. This was actually based a bit also on a contribution that we received, but we were not able to invite, using milk cartons. Christine from our group mentioned that this is the most read text in the whole of Sweden, far exceeding any form of other media. So I think it might be an attractive place also to try to see if you could convince manufacturers to include stories about the EU. You could obviously expand the range of products to infinite directions. And a very short competition. I hope the music works. Using music.
Let songs of war and love resonate on the wide plains of this wide nation. Not by blood or territory do we enter her, but by taking off our shoes and walking with the multitudes.
We were still debating what type of music, obviously, perhaps Avicii, but also perhaps other forms of music, or using sound also to communicate politics in a more effective way would be something that we would like. Using existing European transport modes and trying to also capture or hijack some of their traffic and some of their realizations. This one actually we sort of resonate with, also with Wolfgang. And then this finally as a last idea. Acknowledging perhaps that even the cap is not anymore effective enough to do something. Finally, I think not unimportant, perhaps boring for this audience, but crucial when it comes to this next phase of this project. We had a small but dedicated group committed to finance and for trying to actually build a mini business plan of at least reaching some form of support, which we will in any case need for the future of this project. And the action is called $1 million for millions. So trying to create a large crowdfunding campaign to raise the actual money. And yeah, I think I would like to end on this note, and then maybe the last slide was by the team itself. I didn't have any influence on this when I asked them, how do you see this project moving forward? And this is their response. So hopefully we can perhaps debate that later. Thank you.
Stephan, thank you so much. So far we have been looking into a lot of campaign ideas in Wolfgang's group, but very much, especially in the last presentation part, the sense of urgency on focus. You've been looking at the facts, which are interesting enough to communicate and to organize a new sort of narrative and language. And also in the end, even a sort of narrative which can be used already on caps and other materials. But Rem Koolhaas is now the third one to present the results of his group, and they dived in a little bit more about how to overcome the shortages and the shortcomings in all sort of strategies we have been researched so far. Again, it's a difficult task. It's not easy to have this sort of open source laboratory for 4 days and to come up with just one final great idea. It's a band of ideas. It's an enormous amount of ideas which can help. And I think already it's shown that the new infrastructure is needed to make things move forward. But let's see what the group of Rem Koolhaas has presented. Rem Koolhaas.
We didn't rehearse and see each other's presentations, so I think that there will be a number of redundancies. This is an early attempt where we tried to almost create an attractive caricature of the complexity of Europe. We published a book that includes all the rules that define that define Europe, and basically it was a book 7.5 meters wide. But still we found it a kind of beautiful mountain range of bureaucracy. But of course we are competing with this kind of simplicity, and so therefore we tried moving in this particular direction. Wolfgang already kind of indicated the enormous proliferation of European kind of support, but almost to the point where it becomes ineffective because it is so distributed. And therefore we were kind of looking for very direct kind of messages, and to some extent even into adopting some of the strategies of the enemy. I think this is a group that was kind of thinking about the future of Europe, the year 2030. And of course, the constitution of the group alone is a disqualification, both in terms of age, gender, and effectiveness. We thought that, for instance, the format of a TED Talk could be a very useful format to let politicians speak. So now I will kind of simply present, without kind of further ado, the kind of range of things we came up with. And I do it in a deliberately simple way. We start with very simple ideas that could be, for instance, communicated by the European Commission itself. This, for instance, is a kind of notion of creating a kind of European summer camp.
We were thinking about how we can reach younger people to think about the EU and what the EU means for them and what the EU does for them, talking about democracy and also to get to know other people and other countries. And that's why we thought of the concept of the Euro Week that happens every year in every school in the EU. And we're focusing on students that are in the age of around 14, because that's the age when you're in high school, maybe already talking and are able to speak another language. And why is it happening in school? Is a simple reason, because you know this area and you know your friends and your classmates are around you. You can work very focused on this big topic, and this week is going to happen in the first week of May, since the EU Day is at the 5th of May, so that's quite a good opportunity to open up this event and focusing on schools on what the EU is and means.
So how is this going to work? There will be 2 countries matched yearly, and the pupils get together from their schools with another school from another country, through streaming, for example, and they can just share their culture and what's different about them and what democracy means for them and what does the EU for them, for example, or why should they vote when they're 18.
And next to that, there's going to be this Instagram feed where every participant of the EU Week, not only in your school and your partner school, but also all over Europe or the EU, is able to take pictures and upload them on Instagram using this specific hashtags. And in every school you can just see what happens in this EU Week all over the EU.
Okay, so I think that what this shows is that a kind of innocent proposition could be as important as kind of really sophisticated propositions, because I think that something like this could have a kind of a genuine appeal. The next proposition we are showing is a kind of proposition by a TV producer. It's also a very simple idea to end every TV program on certain stations with a very short recapitulation either of European wildlife or European beauty. And so that on an almost surreptitious or unconscious level, the beauty, but also the adventure, or also the complexity of Europe is kind of shown in a way without too much explanation or without intellectual pretension, but still cumulatively could have a real effect on kind of European self-image. Here we are in the T-shirt territory. And I think that this is kind of somewhere between simple and European Commission stuff and something more subtle. It's simply a kind of proposition to use T-shirts to.
Hello, my name is Claudia, and my project is all about names and famous Europeans. So the project is called I'm Europe. And it's about being proud and being community in a very positive way. It's playful and easy to understand and personal and interactive. So you see these T-shirts with perhaps random names on it. And then you ask yourself, oh, what is the idea behind it? And I would like to have the same. So you go on the website, iameurope.com. There are a lot of names in the background. And then you can choose between 3 different categories, between filling in a name, choosing a category, or adding a new name. So in my case, it's simple, because Claudia is a very common name. I put in Claudia, and there comes the name of top models in the 90s. So I got some more information in the back or here. And I think, okay, it's great. I want to be among these girls. I order the T-shirt. So the next category is, or the next thing is to choose a category. It's science in this case, and in this special case, it's the era of the Middle Ages. So I got Galileo, Nicolaus, Blaise, and Isaac. I have some more information about them, where they're born, and where and when they're born, and that this is a list of famous European scientists in the Middle Age. So I think, great, I want to order it. So the last one is about having a complicated or not so common name. In this case, it's Marike. And I can put in the system, like an open source program, some more information about Marike. In this case, it doesn't fit to any category, and I could say, okay, I just want to be among famous pop musicians from the 80s, so it's Freddie, Annie, Boy, Nina, and Mareike, and I think, great, I want to have this T-shirt. So the great thing would be...
Here we are again in territory of kind of contemporary media, and I'll let her speak for herself as well.
Hi.
She was ill.
I'm going to show you an Instagram campaign that is kind of a grassroots campaign that would happen online, and it's called crew.eu, so it's the crew of the European Union. It originates from the word and the hashtag #CrewLove, and on the left you see some memes that I roughly made or roughly sketched out. So they always play with one painting from European art, and they also use a slogan that is connected to this piece of art, to the painting. And then you have one image of contemporary youth in Europe, and one image that connects the European youth to the global youth or to political events. So the first one is the storming of the Bastille. The second one is an allusion to Galileo Galilei, who said that the world still rotates and nobody believed him, just like nobody believed global warming is actually happening. The third one is kind of a feminist meme. Big Mouth Strikes Again is the Smiths song, and it alludes to Jeanne d'Arc and contemporary idols. And the last one is somehow fighting for equality in sexuality as well. So there's Alexander the Great, who was supposed to have been homosexual, and then the legalization of gay marriage, for example. So then you would have this kind of Facebook page, Instagram page, social media page with all those kind of memes. And if you would click on them, you would also have the explanation of what the images actually mean and how they connect to Europe. And then you can also share it yourself and share your crew love and your love for Europe and vote to remain. Thanks.
This is one of the two waters that was already kind of discussed, that were already discussed earlier. And I think he, in the same continuation of creating information that is lucid, is working on a way to indicate the connection between the European vote, which unfortunately still has to go through national voting for national parties, and that eventually is then translated in European majorities, how that process works to give anyone a better understanding of what they are voting for. Sorry.
Yes. We are currently working on the EU election aid. The current system is that each country has its own website or multiple websites that help people to choose a party to vote for. And they all tend to focus on national parties, which makes sense in the current system. But it does not really create common European Parliament feeling. These national parties do come together, however, in European groups, so why not focus more on these? So our proposal is to make a platform on which you don't only get advice on your country-specific national parties, but also the European groups. This way you get more of a feeling of a common European Parliament, and it's easier to talk to each other. The steps to achieve this, the easiest way would be to convince the current existing platforms to switch their focus from national to European level. The second would be very nice if all these platforms would use the same questions and statements. And a third would be more long-term, to create a single platform for the entire EU.
Okay, so now we move to two perhaps more kind of radical things that would definitely be unimaginable as part of an EU campaign or a kind of formal campaign. And I let the kind of speakers speak for themselves. The last two are also kind of projects that are using or entering the territory that we've seen kind of recently, both in America and in kind of Russia, where robots and other technological entities are being kind of mobilized to interfere in electoral processes that were before kind of really run by and run for human beings. And particularly the last one is in that category. So I let them kind of speak for themselves and then kind of show their project.
Hello, we as a group have been working on probably one of the most controversial projects in Eurolab. We've been experimenting with basically adopting populist communication strategies. It's a very tricky area, of course. We're basically taking the moral lower ground instead of taking what usually happens, the higher moral ground when talking about the EU. We envision a Europe where the borders are up and everybody gets deported back to where they came from.
The word is deported.
We do that by very easy, not very clear and direct language without ionizing anything, and using visuals that don't have any stylization to it but look very like ordinary, but in a powerful way, I would say.
We mixed it in with some data that we took from the EU, like for example we looked at the budget, the yearly budget, and then we will use that for our project to transport people and have people imagine what it would be if this would actually be arranged.
And I think one of the most important things also is that the tactic that we adopted is scaremongering, scaring people, and we focus only on immigration, but that has been the number one issue where people get scared in Europe and the most divisive issue. Yeah? Okay, let's watch.
Okay, thank you so much. And let's discuss this further on the stage. Stephan and Wolfgang, can you also join? Rem, there's a mic on the chair there. Wolfgang, are you ready as well? Okay. Well, to wrap it up, I think we have seen a lot of proposals about nation building on the European level, sharing cultures and change the self-image. be more clear about facts and create new communities, to build new narratives and languages. And in the end, we also saw some ideas of organize the urgency, maybe find even a more negative narrative, or even to use the strategies of, how Rem put it, of the enemy. But that leaves, of course, us with the main question: is this enough? We have seen that creativity, that artists, philosophers, writers coming together bring fresh ideas on the table. But what is the next step? Wolfgang.
Well, like I explained, there is a real problem in getting a mouthpiece. You know, on the one hand, of course, one is free to post anything one wants to post, but the EU social media channels, for example, have surprisingly small numbers. They're a fraction of certain famous people, and well, I personally, as a fairly recent activist, you know, I became an activist 2.5 years ago. I now don't want to carry on speaking as a single person. I don't want to be a one-man campaign. That was authentic, coming as a Londoner, a European German Londoner, and it was an arch that went to the Bundestag's elections last year. But I don't want to become this campaign, and at the same time, other organizations obviously don't seem able or willing to take on board the creative output of other artists. That was difficult at the Brexit, for example, campaign, that people weren't able to take them, and the European Commission can't take them either. So I hope that Forum on European Culture can become somehow a place for independent enthusiasts.
Yeah, but that is what both the group of Wolfgang and Stephan came up with, to start to use the network which is now being built around the Forum of European Culture as a more, let's say, platform of communication. But does it mean, what do you need to make this happen? Stephan.
Well, first I think indeed generating your own enormous organization is probably not the right way to do. I think we agreed on that before. And it's far more interesting to see to what extent you either can collaborate or hijack or use the cloud of others to generate this type of broadness that I think we all feel is necessary to communicate this also to the furthest pieces of the Union. So not only to the urban elites, but also make sure really that it can stretch throughout both the countryside and the city life, and backward and forward and everywhere.
Rem, I think we've seen that there are a lot of creative ideas and that there's the need to bring it together on this sort of platform. On the other hand, you already had experience before how difficult it is to cooperate in a way with the European Commission and the European Union level. Is that still a thing you want to aim for?
No, at this moment I don't think that would make any sense. I think they are beginning to communicate themselves in a way that we think is maybe naive for the moment, and of course they are limited in what they can say, and therefore we fully understand their issues, and we encourage them to continue to communicate, and where possible we would help them. But what we think is now perhaps an interesting perspective is that people like us, or people like us in the room, would have an independent channel, kind of independent of any political system or any organization, where enthusiasm could be vented. And I think that is the most important thing. We are all more or less loving Europe, but there is no channel in which we can invest this love. And so for that reason, I think that to have a channel would certainly and undoubtedly kind of release enormous energy in groups like this one, and potentially project it on a much larger scale than we've been able to do in the past 10 years.
Stephan already mentioned that needs financial resources. It's important that we also find it being backed on a financial level. And then, to a certain extent, Rem, it means that it needs a sort of formality in the structure. Do you see that as well?
Well, I think that basically everything you've seen is very low cost because there's no budget, no sophistication, no technical demands. So I think that on the contrary, what you would hope is that simply this collects energies kind of regardless of really a formal language or a formal level of communication.
Okay. Let's ask the audience gathered here, people from the laboratories and also the people here in the room, what they think of it so far. Maybe they have questions how to bring this further, and we maybe can also ask them how to bring it further, because you have done quite an amount of work. Who can I give the floor? Okay, there's a lady over here on the right. Please present yourself for the moment, and what is your question?
I'm retired, Ineke van der Storm. I worked 15 years all over Europe. My major concern is this. I appreciate a lot of efforts and the enthusiasm, but give me one reasonable answer in your approach. What do you do when you see that there have been migrated 250,000 Italian young people out of Italy because there is no work in Italy? What do you do with people from the Ukraine who come to the EU to get work because there is a lot of a lack of work there? So you get major migration from the borders of Europe to the most richest countries. It is all youngsters. So it is also a loss of their whole social community in these countries, and that's a major worry.
Okay.
I don't see any answer in this whole enthusiasm movement.
Okay. Who can respond on this?
Well, I would like to say that I agree with you, and basically this entire effort is, of course, kind of very vulnerable to the suspicions of elitism and amateurism. But on the other hand, I don't think that we need to claim to offer solutions for the political problems that Europe inevitably has and that are enormous, and kind of some of the ones you mentioned we are deeply aware of. But on the other hand, you also see that in some of the clips there is not only enthusiasm or kind of dumb faith in Europe or a kind of uncritical commitment to Europe, but there's also criticism and I think there's absolutely no hindrance for a kind of vehicle like this to actually become also a critical voice. But at this point, we don't, I think in the face of the European elections, we did not want to kind of emphasize that critical situation.
But for yourself, working in the field so long, what could be a good answer? Let's try to bring it in a more positive, yeah.
To get more solidarity in the economic system. Because we are the wealthiest countries, the Brexit is really also a result because of migration from Central and Eastern European countries. All these youngsters leave these countries and go to the West. And that's a major problem. So we have to show solidarity also in an economic way.
Okay, thank you so much. Other remarks, questions? Yeah, I see someone over there. Let's see if I can reach you. I hold the mic, you can talk easy and you can present yourself.
Hi, I'm Mick from Young European Storytellers Collective, Are We Europe? I was some of the ideas were very good, but I was especially worried by a couple of the slides that had like the white slides, I think in Stephan's presentation with the black text, which was all about us versus them. It was China versus Europe, Russia versus Europe, and it's a lot of criticism within Europe right now about this polarizing discourse and this polarizing narrative. And I just want to ask, why were these particular campaign posters chosen?
Okay, Stephan.
It was not me, it was Wolfgang, so he has to answer.
Well, my presentation reflected the development of the thinking process, and I felt, we are falling into the almost patterns that the European Commission and European Union communication have also tried for the last 15 years, like this sort of friendly approaches and the travel and the this and the that and the Erasmus and at the same time there was in one long intense evening session Vasil from Kiev there, and I noticed, come on, I mean, we're talking here about these amazing positivisms whilst an ardent European is not actually benefiting from them, and there was it was a bit of an eye-opener in general, the discussions about what happens at the edges of Europe, and there are real issues, like it is not that the EU is always the divisive force, but like this Russian situation, which maybe, I mean, I want to ignore it, but I have to wake up to that. Putin can deal with Germany, but he cannot deal with the EU. It is a central interest in Russian foreign policy to weaken the EU, and I think it would help to wake up to this, that it is that the EU and its democracy is under attack from many different angles,
but I think you also should understand.
It's one aspect, but important.
Should understand the status of what we showed. We basically kind of were 3 people kind of working with about 45 random people. I mean, they were selected, but and so we also, or I personally, didn't kind of see my role as editing or as forbidding or as choosing and deliberately kind of show a range that ranges from the innocent to the nasty, as I said. And I think that the process of refinement, but also process of selection needs to take place. And I think that is the open-ended question in the room. If there is a kind of an entity that can broadcast, who is controlling the output of that entity, and is control necessary, or is the denomination of a European communication device enough?
Okay, and I think that's also the beauty of the session of today. The fact that you are having come up with so many ideas, that you are vulnerable for criticism, and that you are now the first to see the results and to criticize it and to make it better, or to look at the weak spots in what has been presented. Any other questions or remarks? Who? Okay. And then I will go to you. Sorry for passing by. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, go ahead.
I was just wondering, it seems like a first practice, like gloves off propaganda, and the kind of test, does this work, does it not? And I'm very sympathetic to the kind of first instances, but is there also like a discussion, like when does like a form of political communication become blatant propaganda, and when it becomes more like a self-conscious test of like experimenting with this kind of European euphoria, as it were? And were the discussions in the group during the sessions, like when is it, some of the things were very clearly looking at trolls, etc. When is it propaganda, and is there that discussion, and when is it?
Okay.
I mean, it seemed. I mean, obviously there was like the deportation thing is playing with that. I think voter turnout and the logic behind a campaign to raise the voter turnout of a European election by 5% is hardly propaganda. I don't see, if that is like the main point that needs discussion, because let's remember, in case the voter turnout sinks another 3%, it would clearly show Europeans are bored of Europe. They are not interested in politics. Whereas imagine if it went from 43 to 48%, it would be total front-page news. Europeans engage again. They're interested in, and they understand that this current European Parliament actually has powers to change Europe, to implement things for the greater good.
Okay. a question over here. Okay, go ahead. Ik hou hem vast.
Yep. My name is Nicolas. I work for the European Parliament. I work on a campaign on the European elections. I was very, very touched, very moved by everything you've done. I think you are going to inspire us as communicators. I think we learned a lot from you today. And I just wanted to share with you that as civil servants, we understand as well our limitations. So we've worked on a small startup inside the European Parliament with our trainees, because we were talking about blowing our minds. I think our trainees blew our mind big time. And they came with a lot of similar conclusions than you, which is to focus on the election and to focus on voter turnout. In Slovakia, 5.6% of young Europeans voted in Slovakia. There's no European democracy in this kind of situation. So we just launched 2 days ago a new website, thistimeimvoting.eu. We have already close to 3,000 people who join us, and we are aiming to campaign to increase voter turnout, and this is a call for everyone here in this room to join us. And I would like just to thank you for everything you do and all the energy you are giving us, because this time we need to make Europe a better place, and this is probably, as you said, one of our very last moment to push it up and avoid a European Parliament which will be ungovernable. So thank you so much for everything you do. Really.
Well, that's a nice thing that you say that, but I think how to engage this energy, how to open up yourself, your organization, to bring in those people who are willing to bring it to the next step. I mean, it's nice that you say thank you and then we go on again. But I think the whole message is engage, open up.
Absolutely. I think I personally got the message. I think the message opening up is something I understood. This is why the campaign, we are doing it now. We are doing it with our trainees. We just did an event in Strasbourg with 9,000 young people. All the pitch we did, in all the sessions we did, I didn't speak a word. We let the trainees pitch it to other young people. Now is the time for Europeans to take their matters in their hands. It's not for civil servants to take the microphone all the time. So I leave the microphone for now and let other people talk. I just want you to remember this platform, thistimeimvoting.eu, and to join us. There's a lot of things we can do together.
Thank you. Okay, any comments, Stefan?
Yeah, maybe it would still be nice to simply work together somehow. Or at least... it would... We also had a very, really interesting afternoon with the Commission and the Strategy Department there, and which was a bit of a similar conversation. But it would be good to set that up for a few weeks, 2 weeks from now, to do something.
But let me be more blunt. Is there anything in this production you would like to show in your name?
Is there anything which has been presented today what you want to show in your name as a European communication expert?
Yeah, we have many things to show.
We can all put it at your disposal.
Yes.
We can improve it, we can build upon it, we can...
You want to answer?
Please.
Many different things, I think, can be used for this kind of campaign, because this campaign is not a top-down, but it wants to be a bottom-up campaign. So basically, we are not giving the people what they should distribute, but we are waiting for them to come and to give us ideas. So your ideas will certainly be inspirational for many people, I think.
If you want to have 2 concrete examples, if you give me the time. So in Strasbourg, we had 8,000 young people, and there's one Czech young participant who told me, in my country, young people don't vote, and the only thing they know about the EU is that the EU legislates on the size of cucumber. So I want to do a campaign called For Making Europe Great Again, This Time I'm Voting. And I want to explain everything the European Union is doing. And you use the bees, you use roaming, you use a lot of examples, and I'm going to make short videos and push this on social media.
Okay.
For example.
Thank you so much. I think we have got some remarks, some questions. Last question is for you.
So that means no. Rem Koolhaas is offering you something. I'm hearing a no. Is that correct? Is that correct? I mean, don't you? I mean, we have there's a few of the best artists in the continent, and you're saying no, or what? I mean, I didn't hear it, but maybe I'm deaf, or maybe I'm.
I think this is the beauty about Europe. The beauty about Europe is misunderstanding and miscommunication. Of course, anything Rem Koolhaas says, I'll say yes. So
no.
Yes.
I mean that is definitely not what we want. I think it should not be about art world or art getting. It should be can really seen as a collaboration in the first place, and as a kind of production that is at your disposal.
Well, the interesting thing, of course, is how to combine the bureaucracy of Europe, where you have to work in, with all the sort of legislation on whether or not you can work with creative campaign bureaus and whether or not it's been, completely tendered and so on, in combination with the fact that we have to move on fast, that we have to be very flexible. And I think if you can bring those worlds together, that would be the answer. That would be really nice. But let's see. Last question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Molsari, and I'm originally from India, and as of this year, I'm a Dutch European citizen. And the reason I made that choice, I'm an independent artist, designer, single woman, single entrepreneur, and Europe affords me a kind of a freedom of individualism, and yet at the same time to be part of a sort of safety, a network, a bunch of resources. And for me, it's a choice for the future. In all of the proposals that I saw, I mean, you kind of generally assume that, it's about engaging young people. The only future-oriented proposal was the one that said something like, our children depend on it. My generation, I'm 83 born, is the first where a lot of people choose not to have children. The argument that our children depend on it isn't necessarily so strong. My question is, how are you engaging young people who probably don't realize what it is to have borders, to not be able to cross borders freely because they never grew up at a moment when that was the case? How do we form an argument or an engagement that really takes into account the way young people think today, which is, I connect online and I take for granted the fact that I can move around freely, so I don't need to go do something. I don't see anyone struggling that I have to go stand in line at 7 a.m. to vote. How do we engage people at a level where it's at their level, in their paradigm, in their future, and not from this perspective from, the past?
I mean, there was, you born in '84, you would remember, of course, that there was war in Europe not so long ago, and but it is a big question. What you're asking
it's spot on. The fact that young people see so many benefits that they don't know that they have to fight for it anymore. Rem.
Well, I think that I recognize the issue completely, and I'm also kind of mystified by the extreme egotism of those kind of positions. But I think there were some efforts, for instance, that kind of really insisted on the importance of the vote and were pretty clear in terms of what you have to lose and what you gain. So I think, of course, we're vulnerable to almost any criticism, but I think it's not entirely, your issue was not entirely ignored, I think.
Can you try to give us an answer yourself, because you have thought about it?
Well, I think that it's something...
And do you vote? I mean, that's an important question also.
Well, the first opportunity I got to vote this year, I did, yes. But that's the other thing. I mean, is it about just voting, or is it about making the entire political process much more up-to-date or even future-forward? It's clear that we're still sort of trying to hold on to these procedures that, first of all, don't move even a fraction of the pace that technology moves. There's just no comparison, right? So the question is it enough to vote? Or do we need to actually engage younger people to actually take positions of decision making, and how do we do that? So what about making campaigns for having people stand for office even if they're in their 20s or 30s? We see the popularity of those politicians, but they're very few and far in between. And they're the ones who are actually reigning in the future. I mean, even if it's, you know, just in France and Canada at the moment, but yeah, those are the politicians that actually have a view on the future that speaks to the younger generation.
Okay.
Well, I don't really agree. I mean, the EU just did 2 enormous digital campaigns and digital achievements, which no other parliament has achieved. The roaming costs and GDPR regulations. I think that is quite fast compared to other countries and other areas. So I think also this type of, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what the future is. I think that's also part of the problem.
And I wanted to say that I'm not so interested in the digital fast-forward politics. The reality is that all decisions in democracy are actually taken and made in parliaments, in city councils, and that is the fact is that you have to stand for politics, you have to stand for office, you have to sit through boring meetings, and it is actually also quite embarrassing. I noticed myself, like I had to overcome my own embarrassment to speak out publicly for something as middle of the road as the EU. And somebody told me, an English politician, people are getting ever more politicized, but they don't want to go into politics. And that is the problem. You know, like everybody does social media, but to really sit and take office, to discuss, to and be happy, not to change the whole world. So many people say, oh, voting doesn't matter. It's so immodest, you know, to expect that if it isn't all built in my image, in my ideas, then I'm not participating. And that vanity people have to come over.
But I think that also it's not an either-or situation. I think that what we're discussing is a channel through which different typologies of production, argument, etc., can be kind of sent out and broadcast. I think that your campaign could be a campaign for your kind of people to enter politics, and I don't see any incompatibility to make you part of that such a channel.
Okay. One last remark from Faisal. You've been in the laboratory over the last 4 days. You're from?
I'm from Kyiv, from Ukraine. I'm really, first of all, I wanted to thank to Wolfgang for showing this video. I perceive it as a solidarity gesture. Thanks so much. But I'm also happy that there are critical voices in the audience in regard to what we have discussed through, and I'm quite satisfied that this initiative proposed a room for some dissensus. Yeah, but I would say that if behind this initiative, if we aim somehow to shape or to intervene into the mainstream of the pro-European discourse on the continental level, I would say that there are 2 important dimensions to be present there. First of all, I think that it's already somehow was voiced, that played out in the last video, but I think it's very important to underline that there should be some room, some space in the pro-European discourse to voice conflictuality which is inscribed in the very European construction. Somehow to show, to articulate antagonisms.
Okay, second.
Because if it's not done in the pro-European discourse, it will be done in the anti-European discourse, right? I think we have to be honest and to put it straightforward, that the EU is not just facing the problems, but it's part of the problem.
Okay. Second.
And second, it's about borders and new walls that I imagine, especially because of these migration issues that were mentioned in terms of refugees, because it's we see now that the peripheries of Europe are becoming more and more important and crucial for the European center. The peripheries are at war, they are on fire, and Brexit somehow showed that if the EU doesn't grow, it is just shrinking. So I think this idea of growth of the EU, of growing constantly, we somehow abandon that because we perceive it as a mission impossible nowadays. But if you don't inscribe the growth, we will just lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Then that means thank you so much. We have to say a very big thank you to all the thinkers, philosophers, artists, architects gathered in the laboratory. A big, big thank you for coming over and use your energy for those 4 days. And of course, the 3 moderators and 4 frontmen of this sort of movement in progress. Give them a big hand.